Okay guys, make sure you take a look at the folded brochure comps because those are what you're going to use to build this file. So you're going to lay those flat so that you can see where to build what page. And I generally start the first page as the front of the brochure and the second page is the inside spread. And then as far as the file, the setup that you put together in the brochure is exactly what you need for this, except for the margins. So the margins you're going to have to figure out as you go. I'm going to start out, I wouldn't put 1/2 inch margin on this just because I have a feeling that it's going to restrict where you can put the copy. And remember, you can always change this. So I'm going to start out with 0.375. 0.25 is pretty small. You can see that 0.25 puts you right up against the edge, and for a brochure with a lot of copy, you don't want it to feel like it's just stuffed with copy right to the edge. So I would recommend going at least 0.375, but you could try 5, and if you run out of space, you'll just come up here and change it back. So everything's set up. You got your fold lines, bleed, you've got the margins, which is going to make it really easy. I would make sure that you go to View, Grids and Guides, and lock those guides so that you don't accidentally move them. So now we just have to place the copy off to the side. Now with this one, because it's so much copy, we're probably not going to be able to see it all at once. Do you see the plus there at the end? So what I would do is go to Text Frame Options and just give this 2 columns. Now you can see all the text, which helps a lot because you have a lot of decisions to make. So then the next thing you need to do, looking at your layout, is go through and grab all these chunks of copy, put them in a separate box for each chunk until you have the placement, because that allows you some freedom. So now I have the Foucault pendulum in a box, the Dome Theater, Science on a Sphere, the cover information, the public shows, the Imagine. So I'm just placing these so that I can work with them. Now the next thing you need to do is style this text. And I wouldn't put the images in yet because the most important thing on this is that you get this text styled, you get it readable, and you get it fitting, and then you'll know how much room you have for images. So the first thing then when dealing with text is what typeface are you going to use? I wouldn't recommend going to properties and just start looking and saying, oh, what should I use? Should I use something here? Or maybe this would be kind of cool. That's really kind of that's not really the most efficient or creative way to find what text you're going to choose. So here is what I would recommend. Let's go to Adobe Fonts. Go to All Fonts so we can look at everything and type in something that kind of gets you started. So I could say planetarium in all caps, but also in upper and lower case. Because number one, you want to make sure that the typeface you choose has upper and lower case, and you want to see what it looks like in all caps. So now you have 3,355 font families to choose from. So let's narrow that down. The first thing you go to is classification. Classification divides all of these typefaces into these groups. So for something like a planetarium, it's very unlikely that you're going to go with a slab serif. A slab serif has a certain kind of clumsiness to it. It's chunky and it just doesn't feel right for something that's so high-tech and modern. I would avoid script also because you need some credibility here. You need to show that you're a serious planetarium and not a Disneyland type thing. Mono weight is just like the even weight as if each piece of type is in a box. So that's really not going to give you very much efficiency either. And I would certainly rule out hand-drawn type for that same credibility problem. So now we're up to sans serif or serif. You can either choose one, so you could choose a sans serif family, and we'll go and look at, so let's see how many we have of these. 1,011 families. So you could choose one of these, and then if it has a large family, you could also use it for body copy, but you want to kind of get rid of some of these oddball ones here. Some of the other filters are the number of fonts in this family. So if you're going to use the sans serif type for the body copy, meaning that the larger copy is either also sans serif or it's a serif. But if you plan on using sans serif for your body copy, you're going to need some fonts in that family. So first thing I would do is move that over so you only get typefaces that have a full family of weight and such. You could go down here. Maybe if you're challenged for space, you could choose a condensed sans serif. These will give you more space, so you could grab a couple of those. If not, you could just go with normal. I wouldn't choose the weight just because if you're getting a family, you're going to get all the weights within that. X height, I don't know that that really applies here with the sans serif. Contrast, this just means a perfectly even weight contrast, which most sans serifs are, or a little bit of thick and thin as it goes around the letter form. Very subtle since most sans serifs are even weight. So I wouldn't consider that a factor. And I'll take width off now just so we can go and explore some other stuff. This, of course, you want something with an italics, which I think you'll get if you have this many fonts in a family, 6 or more. A double or single story A. So that's not just the A, but it's also the G, like in a lowercase typeface. So a single story is going to look a little bit more modern, and a double story is going to look a little bit more old-fashioned. I'm going to take that out too. I'm not going to put any properties in here. I'm just going to put sans serif. Now, when it comes to these up here, these are really just tags, meaning they're someone's interpretation of what kind of typefaces these are. So someone might consider it clean, someone else might not. You can use these though because it'll help narrow it down. So in this case, I would say with a planetarium, you could go with clean. Now we're down to 67 clean sans serif typefaces. And you can go through here and just see which of these kind of gives you the right feel. This forma is kind of nice. It's got a clean look, and you can see I've already activated it. And when you come in here, you can kind of see it in use and look at how wide the family is on that. So that would be a really good choice. And there are so many variations that you could use this as both the large text and the body copy because there's enough weight differences. So you'll go through here. These are all clean, which means none of them are going to have, a silliness or extreme styles. They're going to be pretty straightforward. Things you'll look for, like look at the apex on this A. It has a slight flat part. This one has a slight part. This one is very pointed, which feels more kind of modern and geometric. It probably has a very even O. Let's look at how it's used. And you can see it does have a very clean, it's got a one-story G, meaning that it doesn't have that squiggle link and loop at the bottom. So this is pretty nice. And look at how many variations it has, which would be really helpful. Another thing you could try is geometric. A clean typeface and a geometric are pretty close to the same thing. But what geometric means is that the O's, so if I put an O here, O planetarium, you can see that the O's are pretty much a perfect circle. So that's what geometric means. Friendly, I think, is going to get a little bit too cute in this case. So I'm not sure if that would be a good choice. Rough, Art Deco, cursive, fun. I wouldn't put any of this. I know that they have field trips and that kids are involved, but we still need to position this as a serious and legitimate planetarium. So I would avoid friendly. I would say clean and geometric are probably your best choices. You're not going to get a lot of selections for a luxury sans serif. 7 font families. And I don't know that these are necessarily right for something like this. They're more for like wedding invitations and stuff. So that's how you would choose a sans serif. Now, if we want to choose a serif, we have 297 font families, but serifs can range all over the place. You can see this one's got real thick and thin. When a typeface has an extreme thick and thin like that, it gets pretty sophisticated. You can see their ampersand is very ornate and sophisticated. It's a little bit more of a fashion typeface. Vogue magazine has a similar typeface that's got that extreme thick and thin. So we might want to avoid that. So if you go down to the contrast, and that's what we mean by contrast. You see on these 3, even weight, slight variation, very extreme thick and thin. We don't want the extreme thick and thin. I would say if you just went with normal contrast, that'll narrow it down a little bit. Now we have 194 font families. Other than that, you could try the X height is another example of on a serif. A low X height typeface gives this type kind of an old-fashioned look. So you can see there's only 7 of these font families, and you can see this, of course, more in an upper and lower case. And do you see how these kind of have an old-fashioned feel to them? That's because of that low X height. Now, if I change that to a high X height, you're going to get a different feel. Like look at this one, this P22. Do you see how high the X height is? And the X height is right at the top of the lowercase letters. But you're also seeing things that are rounded. Like this is entirely too friendly for something like this. So we've got a medium contrast and a high X height, which are going to both kind of avoid that over luxurious and maybe overly friendly. Now if we put clean in there as a filter, they're stumped. A clean sans serif is kind of an odd pairing. Even a geometric sans serif, there's only one. A geometric sans serif is not very likely either because they're not perfectly round. They're not like geometric shapes. So there aren't very many then that you could choose here. Like you could see if you choose luxury, you're going to see some of those extreme thick and thin. And luxury does not feel right for this. It's got too much little personality. Like that little dip in the A at the end is a little bit too much fashion and style for something that's a planetarium. Also, wedding, you're going to get something that's a little bit more conservative and ornate. So I would probably avoid that. You have the same choice with your serif as you do with your sans serif, meaning that you could go with a serif for the larger type and a sans serif for the smaller type, or you could reverse that and have a sans serif as your subheads and such, and use this serif for body copy. Serif is actually really good for body copy, and if you're choosing this, I recommend taking the type size down because you really need to see how this reads when you're looking at it small. Like this one would be a bad idea. Anything that's got that kind of open spacing, we don't want that for body copy. Even this one, anything that's too wide is going to use up a lot of space. So we want to look for something that's not too wide, has a clean look to it, not old-fashioned. This one's a little bit too thick and thin. This one's too even and kind of heavy. That one's a little old-fashioned. Do you see how low the X height is? This one's not bad. This P22. That one's a little bit too chunky. But you have 25 pages to choose from. Another thing you could do is you could say, I want a single story on the A. Now watch the ones that come up. They only have these A's. They don't have the 2-story A or the ones that are built like this. So that kind of changes the look of the type, and you could certainly do that. Other than that, you just have to look through them. So let's say that I'm going to choose, just to show you styling, I'm going to choose a sans serif. I'm going to choose something that has nice even contrast. I want a high X height so it doesn't look too old-fashioned. I want something with at least 6 fonts in the family, so I might be able to use this for body copy also. And I want something that has a kind of clean look to it. This looks good to me. There's only 4 that come up with that. This looks pretty good. Area. It's got a little, ooh, see that T? I wouldn't choose this typeface. Not for a planetarium. I think that that's a little bit too wiggly and a little bit too kind of stylized. We're representing space and science, so I would choose something a little bit more clean. This PT Sans looks good. It only has 4 fonts in it, so I'm not sure that's enough. Let's look and see. It's got bold, it's got narrow. That might be useful. Narrow, bold. Yeah, this has a little bit of style, but it's pretty clean. So I could activate all of these, PT Sans, and be good to go. Now, if I wanted to use this for my headlines and I wanted to use a serif for body copy, that would be okay. Generally, serifs go with other serifs in the family or a sans serif. But you don't want to pick 2 serifs or 2 sans serif. Think of it like when you build a meal. If you had pasta, you wouldn't serve a bowl of pasta and then another bowl of pasta. So one's spaghetti and one's linguine. You would change it. You'd complement the main dish with something that's different but has the same vibe. So you'd go with French bread and salad, things like that. You wouldn't show something radically different like sushi as a side dish to spaghetti. So that's kind of how I look at choosing typefaces. You want to complement your main dish. You don't want to repeat it, and you don't want to come out of nowhere and put something odd with it. Next, we'll go in and start styling our text.